People feel safer to share, and disagreements become opportunities to learn rather than battles to win.
You're not here for the same old, same old. You're not here for just tips. You're here because something in you knows it's time to change. Not just how you lead, but how you live. I'm Janet Ioli, and this is The Inner Edge, a podcast about leadership, self-mastery, resilience, and reinvention for a new world era. Real life, whole self, let's go there. Welcome to The Inner Edge.
Welcome back to The Inner Edge. Today I want to talk about something that sounds pretty simple, but it's actually one of the most transformative things you can bring into your leadership, your relationships, and even your encounters with strangers. And it is a choice to approach people with curiosity rather than judgment. And to get there, I want to take you back to where I grew up, halfway across the world, in a place where I learned early on that there was never just one way to see things. I grew up in Greece, as many of you who are listeners knew that and know from listening to me, in a bicultural household. My mom was originally from Greece, and so she was rooted deeply in the Greek traditions, her culture, and her ways of seeing the world, the way she was socialized in Athens. My dad was American from the U.S. He was from Tennessee, right outside of Memphis, a Southerner who carried with him the values and perspectives of his own upbringing, and definitely very different cultures. He was in the U.S. Air Force and later worked for a government contractor overseas, so our household in Greece was a blend of two very different cultural norms. And here's what that meant for me as a child. I was constantly moving between both worlds. There was the Greek way of doing things, family-centered, steeped in tradition, where community and history were everywhere. And then there was the American way, which was more individualistic. What are you going to do with your life? Pragmatic and future-oriented. And of course, there were other stereotypes of, how the foods and what you eat and all of those sorts of things. Even things like, you don't, in Greece, if it's May, you don't wear summer clothes yet. I don't care if it's 90 degrees outside. Maybe that's changed. But when I was growing up, there were these rooted, crazy rules that everyone knew and followed, and it was totally opposite what the American way was. But both ways felt normal and they felt true, but the problem was they contradicted each other. And so I was learning to appreciate one and learning to appreciate the other. And on top of that, I attended an international school in Athens with kids from 12 different countries. And so my classmates were from Germany, they were from India, they were from the Middle East, South Africa, Egypt, France, the UK. I think there was somebody from Japan, and each of them brought their own version of what was normal. Now, this was in an English-speaking school, but there was representation from all of these different countries. So here I was, Greek traditions on one side, Southern American traditions and values on the other, and a classroom full of global perspectives in between of different religions, different ways of seeing things, cultural things, what people would wear. But it was ingrained. It wasn't just like having one or two classmates. It was the whole classroom. It was like an infusion of all these different cultures. And that could have been confusing, and sometimes it was. But more than anything, it shaped me in a way that I didn't fully understand until much later, much later. Once, I was past college and I realized, wow, that's not the norm. That's not how most people grow up, and especially here in the United States or even in Greece. They don't grow up with this, even though we pride ourselves in the United States of being a melting pot. It's almost as if we're integrated but separate. This was integrated. And it was integrated right in my house. So I had two different cultures. And it taught me, and this is what I come to value from learning this, is that there is no single right way to see the world. that every perspective that we hold comes from somewhere. Comes from how you're socialized, from your cultural roots, from what your family or what your community or your religion teaches you. And instead of trying to decide who was right, because there were differences right there, I learned to ask questions, to get curious, and to say, huh, tell me about that. I want to learn about that. Well, how do you see it? And here's what I've realized. Judgment, trying to figure out what's right or wrong, making a judgment is really easy. Our brains are wired to make judgments. Neuroscience tells us that when we encounter something unfamiliar, our brains make lightning fast assessments, safe or unsafe, good or bad, like me, not like me. That snap judgment was once a survival mechanism because if you didn't do that, you could get eaten. But in our modern global world, it can make us dismiss, stereotype, or distance ourselves from people who are just simply different. Curiosity, on the other hand, takes a lot of effort. It requires slowing down, moving past that automatic defense or judgment that may be coming out of the primitive brain. And it requires slowing that reflex down and asking questions and being open to an answer that may not be familiar. And it may challenge our own view of what we learned. And remember, the key word is learned is right. So research on intercultural competence and leadership development backs this up. Leaders who practice curiosity build stronger trust, they foster inclusion, and they create environments where innovation flourishes. Because curiosity communicates, I value your perspective. I want to learn from you. And the more we learn and the more viewpoints come into the table, the more innovation there is. In fact, a Harvard Business Review study found that curiosity not only enhances collaboration, but it also, now this is really weird, reduces conflict. When curiosity is present, people feel safer to share and disagreements become opportunities to learn rather than battles to win. And I want to say that again. Disagreements become opportunities to learn rather than battles to win, because we're not there advocating for what our socialization told us is right. I think back to my classmates in Athens. On the surface, we were all just kids. We were playing, well, I didn't like soccer, but a lot of people were playing soccer. We were trading snacks at lunch. We were telling each other secrets on the playground, talking about who we liked, who we didn't like. We were doing all those things. But underneath, each of us carried a different lens shaped by our culture. And some of them were similar ones, but they were different. And those differences, with all those different countries and all those different kids, could have divided us. But really what it did, and I remember that school really well, is they expanded us because we were all socialized in that environment to be curious. And we would ask, how do you celebrate holidays in your country? Or what do you eat? Or, ooh, what's that dish that you brought in for lunch? Or what does your family do when someone is sick? Or what traditions do you celebrate? And what we found again and again was that beneath those really surface cultural norms, we were really all the same. We all wanted belonging. We all wanted somebody to play with. We all wanted somebody to connect with and hang out with. And we wanted connection. Nobody wanted to be shunned. Nobody wanted to be the one who isn't talking to anybody on the playground or in the lunchrooms or even later in high school, that we were together. And of course, then there were in groups and cliques formed, but it wasn't about difference in terms of what country you came from, what culture you came from. Fast forward to leadership. This applies. When you walk into a meeting room filled with people from different functions, generations, backgrounds, you're walking into an international classroom just like that. Everyone sees the world a little differently, unless you're surrounding yourself with people who are exactly like you, from exactly the same type of upbringing, the same religious values, the same traditions, etc. And that's a choice. And your choice is, will you judge or will you be curious? And this happens in organizations. Will you leverage all of this richness or will you be set in your ways? So let's talk about how you can practice this. Here are a few simple but powerful ways. First of all, pause the reflex. When you find yourself labeling someone as difficult or wrong or out of touch, stop. Ask yourself, what could be shaping their perspective? What might I not know? So stop before that judgment comes in. And that's the power of the pause. I probably say that in almost every episode. Second, ask open questions. Instead of debating or advocating for your view or trying to win, because we're in this winning war now, tell me how you see it. Or what experience do you have with this? Tell me about it. These questions signal respect and they invite real dialogue. And it goes back to eons ago, Stephen Covey's book, The 7 Habits of Highly Successful People, where he says, seek first to understand, then to be understood. And I think that captures the essence of what we're saying here. And third, monitor multiple truths and honor multiple truths. Just like I learned to honor both my Greek and Southern American traditions, you can hold space for more than one way of being. It's not always about finding the right way. Even to this day, I can't tell you if the Greek way is right or the Southern Baptist way that my dad was raised in was right. It doesn't really matter. It's about recognizing that both of these ways can enrich us. And then finally, look for the soul beneath the surface. Approaching things with curiosity isn't just about gathering information. It's about connecting at a human level. And I'm going to say this again, and I keep saying it because that's the inner edge. When you listen with genuine interest, people feel seen. And when people feel seen, the best comes out in them. So here's my challenge to you this week, just to apply this. Think about one person in your life that you've been judging, and that's probably easy to do, and it's probably way more than one, just one. Maybe it's a colleague whose style drives you crazy. Maybe it's a family member who just doesn't get it. Or maybe it's someone you just write off because they just don't get it. What if instead of taking that stance, you got curious? What if you asked a question and truly listened without rushing to agree or disagree, just to understand the perspective? You might not change your mind, and that's not what we're talking about. We're not talking about you've got to go change your beliefs and values or whatever. They may not change theirs, but what you will change is the space, the energy between you. And in that space, that's the space where respect and connection can grow. You don't have to be the same. You don't have to agree. But it's that respect and connection that grows in that space. Because at the end of the day, curiosity is what lets us see each other, not as categories, not as you're this, you're that. I hate this that's happening today in our world, but it's not as stereotypes, but as souls. And when we do that, if we can start seeing people that way, we actually show up differently, but we also lead differently. And Lord knows, we need that in our world today. So thank you for joining me on this journey. If this story about curiosity resonated with you, please share it with someone who you think might need a reminder about this. And remember that leadership isn't always about having the answers or the judgments. It's about asking the right questions, staying open, and always leading with less ego and more soul. That's the inner edge.